Hello. Now, just a couple of days ago, I had a feeling, quite a strong feeling that I've not had for quite some time now, and this was one of intense fear and embarrassment, possibly shame, or false shame, perhaps, but certainly a fear, anticipating um, doing something that was a little bit nerve wracking. And what I was doing was going to a fancy dress shop, which actually is located really quite close to where I live, on quite a prominent street. And I had seen a dress in the window that I thought would be wonderful to try and recreate a look that I was keen to do, uh, and plan to do indeed. And so I was going to go into the shop for the very first time. Actually, I've been into the shop. Very strange for me to get this very, very deep unease, but it took me back to a time, um, certainly during my younger years, through my teens, through my 20s, when that was a very common feeling. This sense of being embarrassed about possibly being, shall we say, exposed, or coming into a situation where I might need to explain myself for wanting to dress in feminine clothes. And I guess this sort of touches on what is a sort of perennial, certainly in modern Western society, fear of men behaving in a feminine manner, this kind of social expectation that there is for men to be men by many people, and perhaps reinforced through traditional religious views, or certainly of some of the faith traditions. Um, Certainly, it was part of my upbringing. I think that it was expected that I would conform to certain behaviors as a young boy and in growing up. Um, and I had a sense right through my schooling, even into university, that to want to present as a girl would have been severely frowned upon, or if it wasn't frowned upon, it would have been treated as kind of a humiliation for me, and therefore perhaps something I should be ashamed of. And I guess that was a little bit what was triggered for me when I was going into the shop the other day. Very strange if you have a YouTube channel like this and are actually relatively open and relatively comfortable about wandering around the streets on femme, as I am these days, to have this feeling. But it's just shows it's still there. It can be triggered in certain circumstances. And I guess this was one of these situations where I really didn't know who was going to be inside, how I was actually going to explain what I wanted, and sort of cope with that discomfort. As it happened, there were quite a few people inside. There was several people serving, and there was other customers, and I did explain what I wanted, and it was treated very professionally and without any apparent, let's say, negative or humorous or any other kind of out of the ordinary response from others. I'm sure they are very, very used to all sorts of requests in a shop like that. But yes, this long running cultural unease with men presenting in a certain way, it doesn't really seem to work the other way with girls and women, at least not quite as strongly. Perhaps it's seen that, well, if the tomboy is sort of wants to play rougher games or wear more masculine clothing, then in a sense, if we can put it this way, if the patriarchy is really what's one of the main drivers in this perception that, men are the kind of the leaders. I hate this because I don't agree with it, but if we take this as being perhaps a root, in um, the social order, then they are, as it were, um, elevating themselves. Whereas for a boy to take on a female role, and I think this is a line in a Madonna song, it is embarrassing. It is letting yourself down and letting others down, perhaps, not playing your part as someone that's ready to go out there to fight, if necessary, in wartime, to be the traditional main breadwinner for your family, and so on. So traditionally, of course, boys and men are meant to be courageous, have a kind of stiff upper lip, be ones that go out, that explore, expose themselves to danger, um, be dispensable in times of war, show great resilience, and certainly not demonstrate any kind of so-called perceived weakness or delicacy or anything that would be considered effete and weak. Now, as I say, I don't like those labels. I don't agree with them, but I think they persist in many people's minds, even if subconsciously in the main. And certainly, I suspect, I'm not involved in these groups these days, but among certain male cliques, possibly in certain industries, or I don't know, in the military or police, or for secondary school boys as well, maybe there's still the potential for quite a lot of ribbing for anyone that doesn't, any male member of those groups who kind of should deign to stand out as a weak chicken, shall we say, a sort of a redneck. Is that the right word? To show red, to show a perceived weakness amongst their number. As I say, I absolutely hate all those stereotypes. I don't agree with them. I'm happy to see that they seem to have eroded quite a lot in my own country in the last few decades, but there is still something there that causes this sense of embarrassment. It isn't seemly for a guy to present themselves in a delicate way, or to show an interest in over beautifying themselves, or anything that expresses gentleness and so on. I find this bizarre because all of those are qualities that I personally value and like to embrace, but I suspect that they're still there at root, even if people don't want to admit that they are a part of what causes this kind of unconscious bias that leads those of us who do like to express their way to feel this sense of shame and embarrassment from time to time. So just thought I'd reflect on that. It's undoubtedly, I'm sure, a sense, a feeling that many others who cross-dress have encountered over the years, perhaps like me. Generally speaking, you may to some extent have overcome that, but just a reminder that triggers like that can always be there.